Sonic Boom Episode 29, The Biggest Fan. Amy complains that they asked Sonic to speak at Career Day. Yeah, that is really weird since, well, one, Amy's complaining about that instead of congratulating him and understanding him, respecting him like she should. But two, yeah, that is really weird since Sonic doesn't have a career unless the government pays him to fight Eggman, which would be a career. But Sonic should have explained that, and he wouldn't have needed to explain that to her because she'd have the same career. And somehow Comedy Chimp didn't know it was Career Day until he read the card. Then Sonic impresses the crowd by telling them he fought Eggman, and it was cool when he dropped the mic, but wouldn't it damage the mic? I guess he can get away with anything. Then Sonic gets met by a nerd who's a big fan of his and shakes his hand too much. And he gets mad at himself because he doesn't have the paper to get an autograph from Sonic, and he startles Sonic being right up in front of him. Sonic says he wants to sit with his friends instead of him, and the insult to the Sonic fanbase pulls the table up to Sonic instead. Isn't it bad marketing to insult the fans of the franchise you're writing for by stereotyping them? The fan gets irritated too easily, and Sonic snarks that this fan is the first one who doesn't criticize everything it does. And Amy doesn't point out that they criticize because they wanted to do better, even though she showed she's in the business of insulting him. Sonic calls him a nice guy when he leaves at least. Then we see the fan ask Sonic why he's waiting in line like a normal person, and he offends people in front of him by calling them unwashed masses. This episode sucks. It's really terrible marketing to do this. What, are they telling you to stop being a fan? That can't be it, but that's how it's coming off, so that's really pathetic. Sonic tells him to stand in line while he gets a chili dog heroically, and the fan cuts in line and calls himself Sonic's personal assistant. He's told he has to buy more stamps, feels terrible about himself, and sadly tells Sonic that his package needs another stamp, and is relieved that Sonic didn't get mad at him. He's got issues. At least this adds some unexpected depth to his character because he's quick to be insecure and think he didn't do a good enough job, or he's quick to think someone will get really mad at him, which must be from experience, and is really annoying. And Sonic walks away with him and says this is the start of a wonderful assistantship. It is impressively pragmatic of him to take advantage of the annoying fan and use him as a slave, instead of not getting anything out of him. I'm not sure I'd have the patience for him. Sonic already has friends. It's just that I expect Sonic to just want to avoid him, which Fleetway Sonic would have done, and avoided this entire plot. Sonic's supposed to be impatient, and no patient person would put up with this guy for more than a second, mainly because his voice sucks. The fan compliments him on something he bought, shows him a flattering picture of Sonic, and gives him electrolytes and gives him a strategy. And Sonic spin dashes at a big robot. But why does it simply walk away? Where's Eggman? Is this a Rise of Lyric thing? Why wouldn't everyone have just broken down these big metal golems for scrap metal to take advantage of? How do they keep discovering new ones by this point? Sonic tells the fan that he's been spending a lot of time with him and they should take the day off. And the fan drives Sonic's cart into a rock to injure him, giving him an excuse to spend all his time with him nursing him back to health. Sonic asks if he should see a doctor in this overly creepy episode for a supposed comedy show. Amy complains that Sonic didn't show up for the movie and isn't answering his communicator. And then we see the fan dress up and briefly read his fanfiction, the one that's family friendly, where Sonic points out that he never says something so eloquent. Wait, that's hypocritical of the show because this is the same show that had Sonic call some people slack-jawed rubes. And Sonic can't really escape because of the body cast thing he's wearing. And the fan snarks that Son Amy isn't something he cares for, but it's obligatory in the fan base, after Sonic says all impressed that it looks spicy, instead of reacting like Sonic actually would, with revulsion. So if you're not gonna have Sonic react in character to seeing Son Amy fanfiction, or at least the word Son Amy, then what's the point of writing this? Even a random fan would write this better. Even Sonic Shorts did this more realistically when Sonic and Shadow looked at pictures of themselves together. Another thing I noticed is how ridiculous it is that he has his fanfiction written down on pieces of paper instead of just on a computer. But to be fair, I've done that too in high school when I was bored in class, so it's not like it would never happen. I think like 1% of his fanfictions would logically be like that. He needed to have his fanfiction in holdable paper so Sonic could read it off like a script when role-playing his tales. So it's kinda justified. Sonic's friends show up at Mark's house, planning to get into the cabin because apparently they know where he lives, when he's just a random civilian they should have no respect for at all. And inexplicably, they all get injured by a swinging log after arbitrarily going to Mark's log, a swinging log that somehow the random fanboy was able to make. Then Sonic and his friends all awkwardly try to slowly walk towards Mark in the body cast in a really cringe-worthy scene that embarrasses the entire show and franchise, before he throws up Sonic and he has to do some somersaults. The heroes keep bumping into each other by accident, and as I expected from the start, none of them were actually injured. So when Sonic gets broken out of the body cast, he easily spin dashes around Mark and ties him up with tape he somehow got. And Amy lampshades that he always overdoes it with the sports tape. So if the writer's aware that no one likes the sports tape, why don't the people in charge get rid of it, the idiots? That's terrible marketing. And that can be said for the entire episode. True, it's not like we didn't see other fans than Mark, like the crowd cheering for Sonic, and the little girl who asked for his autograph and he ran away. So we're being told that this isn't the norm. But still, this was just a cringe-worthy and creepy episode that, for a so-called comedy, really went overboard on the dark tone. This reminds me of that iCarly episode where the main characters got kidnapped by a psychopathic fan of theirs. They had an episode called I, Psycho. That's not a bad fanfiction, that's an actual episode. And this episode has a fan actually make Sonic think he's injured and put him in a body cast, which even that episode didn't do. No other continuity of Sonic has done an episode like this, not even Archie, the darkest one of all. So that says something about how dissonant this tone is. How did he get his hands on a body cast, by the way? I don't want to think of this as just a meta concept, because realistically Sonic would have fans in universe. This doesn't have to be meta. It becomes meta when it turns out this guy writes fanfiction about him, when people are way less likely to write fanfiction about a real person. And when Sonic says that his fans criticize everything he does, that also is too meta, because in the episode itself, not one single fan insults him. All we see is a crowd of people cheering for him instead of being bored and jaded by him describing business as usual. This shouldn't be too exciting to these people. So where'd that come from? Well, because it's insulting the fans who actually watch the show, which is totally not terrible marketing. I'm sure the first thing they ever teach you in marketing class is insult your fans. It does make sense that this would happen to Sonic eventually, but just because it makes sense doesn't mean it's remotely enjoyable to watch, especially the stupid fight scene with them. It was an uncomfortable episode. And what really made no sense was that the fanboy was able to make a log trap and body cast in the first place. It could have been explained as he did research on Styx to learn how she made log traps, but someone paranoid like Styx wouldn't tell people how she made her traps because then they'd make traps too. It strikes me as distractingly out of character that Sonic would spend so much time with Mark, who's just a guy, instead of immediately avoiding him and requiring the guy to go out of his way to stalk him. Instead, he makes things too easy for him. Also, what we should have seen in this episode was the logical aftermath where Sonic called the police. Instead, they'll just walk out of his house with him tied up. So who's gonna untie him? Does he just die of starvation? Then Sonic would be charged, so that couldn't have happened. He has to have called the cops and they untied him. It's bad enough that the show almost never made me laugh. Did they have to make a story like this too? You know what show makes me laugh multiple times an episode most of the time? Malcolm in the Middle. That's way funnier than shows like this or Adventures of Sonic, where I laughed like 5 times in the whole show. I always expected that the show would make me laugh a lot and I'd have a hard time hearing the characters for my review. But considering Sonic's terrible track record with comedy, I shouldn't have assumed that. I had the exact same assumption with AOSTH, because I thought Looney Tunes was hilarious, so why not a ripoff of it? Anyways, my point with this episode is that most Sonic fans wouldn't kidnap Sonic and his friends, even if they're like Mark in every other way. There are fans that write fanfiction, but I think they'd just be too embarrassed and self-conscious to read them to Sonic, even if they were great. It's teaching the lesson that spending a lot of time with a fan of yours is guaranteed to be a stupid idea, because it's inevitably going to lead to this overly dark scenario that's really unlikely to happen, even though most fans are just like normal people, not obvious from a mile away. Most Sonic fans are normal people, which at least the crowd showed off well. Most vocal fans are pedantic, bitter, and obsessive, but that's because they care enough about the franchise to talk about it on the internet, which is what a franchise needs, because if its fans don't care about it, they won't be motivated to give a lot of sales, let alone care enough about it to be bothered enough by its flaws to complain about them. And the franchise is so flawed that what fan wouldn't complain about it? We complain because there's a lot to complain about. That's not our fault, and that doesn't make us the bad guys. So they should have had Amy point that out, instead of implying that the writer doesn't understand why fans are so critical and not even giving them an argument in their favor, which is immature strawman writing, and which Amy would have done, since she was already being mean to Sonic. The only fan that really had a major speaking role was Mark. The crowd just cheered, and there was this girl who asked Sonic for his autograph, which Sonic fan would do because Sonic isn't real. So there's no good representation. It's giving the unhealthy message that if there's a fan of yours who's really enthusiastic and doesn't criticize everything you do for once, you shouldn't trust them because they'd have to be just as creepy as Mark. Because you can't have positive fans without any sort of catch. Why, Mario certainly doesn't have those. What a clueless message. And it doesn't matter if the episode was trying to have a lesson or not. The fact remains that it did because of what it implied. If an episode has a message unintentionally, it's not the fans' fault for seeing it, it's the show. Because it should have handled the writing better instead of implying a message it didn't mean. A message like, you shouldn't be a Sonic fan because this is what we think of when we think of you. It always sucks when the show is trying to be too meta. Episode 29-2. Anything you can do, I can do worse. Oh shit, this is by Flynn? We start out with Sonic running away from a vacuum pot that's making Sonic run in a standstill, and it vacuums Sonic up and makes Tails scream in fear. So already, something really dark happens. Although it'll be really temporary, but still. Eggman has an overly long, jokey speech about candy, Sonic easily breaks through the machine, and Tails snarks at Eggman for thinking he could win before Eggman flies away with the Eggmobile. Sonic says it's impossible to catch him, and Tails says he knows he could catch him. So he's being an overconfident jerk who somehow thinks he could catch Sonic. I think I can only remember one other time when he was super arrogant and competitive with Sonic in this show. And he makes a bet with Sonic where the loser would be embarrassed, even though Sonic is supposed to be his best friend, so he wouldn't want him to be embarrassed. Since when do Tails and Sonic interact like this? Amy lectures them that this is a bad idea, saying that Sonic's too competitive. And then the episode ended right there. No, of course it didn't. And Tails brags about himself being a mechanical genius. He's not this overconfident in previous episodes. I think the only time he was outright smug in the show was when he was trying to impress Eggman about his force field machine that runs on brain power. And then Knuckles somehow asks whether Tails is a genius or falls under the description of Sonic, being unbelievably stupid for the sake of a joke, as usual. That's Flynn alright, nothing but out-of-character moments. And for a show where most of the main characters are out of character by default, being noticeably off with them by those standards is an accomplishment. Tails isn't this arrogant, and he would need a much bigger incentive to try to capture Sonic constantly than random arrogance. And you think he'd just make an anti-gravity gun catch Sonic easily, like in AOSCH. But no, we can't be interested in that show, instead we have to make things like the games. So that's probably why Tails is being so smug, because he was smug in Sonic Colors and in Sonic Lost World. That's the only explanation I can think of. Tails gets captured in a cage by Sonic. Although it was really sweet to see Sonic pat his head like a loving big brother, even if it was to condescendingly celebrate a victory. He needs to do something like that every episode to really sell their friendship. The easiest way to get you attached to characters is to really sell the bond they have together. And I didn't really notice this kind of bond before this episode. I mean, there were the occasional moments when there was one episode where he carried him and let him hug him when he was scared of lightning. Sonic lies on a hammock to eat a chili dog just for Tails' slingshot trap to send him flying. Then he discovers Sonic somehow escaped the cage. How do you avoid being humiliated? I don't understand. What a creator's pet. Wow! The animation was so lazy they didn't even bother to show us how he escaped. It makes sense if we saw that there was a hole in the ground in the center of the cage, explaining that Sonic burrowed through the ground to escape the cage. That's something that's happened before. Then for once we see Orbot and Cubot talking to Eggman for a decent amount of time. Though of course Eggman hogs most of the attention, and he plans on capturing Tails after Sonic captures him. So, How'd he find out about what Sonic was doing again? Cameras and microphones, I guess. I mean, that is what he always does. He's constantly spying on Sonic in the show, but this time they're too lazy to even show us that. Knuckles decides to put a barrel and some other barrels against Tails' warnings, so somehow he gets the barrel put over him, and after that contrivance, Sonic sweetly past Tails' head again. I'd much rather see Tails appreciate that gesture though. Like they're overcompensating for him not ruffling his hair nearly enough, but Tails doesn't appreciate it anyways. So, well, at least Tails lives in a straw hut, which is comparable to Knothole, but that's always been the case. Sonic and Amy avoid some rolling boulders, and Amy uses her hammer against the ground to somehow magically fling herself really high in the air. Well, that was the case in Sonic Adventure and Sonic Advance, so they're bringing something from the games into a story. Can you tell who wrote this? Well, this time it's actually a really good thing, because that ability first has a lot of story potential, so I'm willing to bet that it's never going to show up again. So what's the point? Just gonna make things confusing because she'll never use that useful ability again. Then Sonic makes a pun at Tails that his traps are getting bolder, and tells him to set Amy free because he trapped her. Well, that was considerate of him at least. Tails looks interestingly uncharacteristically angry as he throws something on the ground and stomps on it. On the one hand, this episode is portraying Tails and Sonic as being hated rivals, which is really weird, but whatever. I guess I'm saying whatever because it's a change of pace, so that's refreshing. Sonic goes to comfort Tails on a frozen lake when Tails is being sympathetically insecure for once. It's nice of Sonic to do that when they're just competing. It reinforces their friendship. Too bad it's all an act so Sonic could set off an overly long trap to send him to a frozen lake. They are friends, aren't they? I like that the Nutcracker played, but Tails looks like an asshole playing the sympathy card. Sonic had plenty of time to run away from the frozen lake when it was cracking and the trap was being set up. And obviously Sonic would die from falling into the cold water of a frozen over lake, so clearly he didn't learn his lesson from the pilot. Plus, I didn't know it was winter, so how did that lake get frozen over on the surface? Did Tails use an invention? I guess this is the result of the natural chaos energy on Mobius causing this lake to always be frozen over, even on a tropical island. I wish they explained that. Eggman then brags that he has Sonic, and Tails warns Knuckles and Amy about it. At least Tails looks sympathetic and says he's sorry when Amy lectures him about it. That doesn't make up for it though. Then Six appears out of nowhere as they run along a desert. Wait, since when does a small tropical island have a huge desert canyon in it anyways? Well, at least Tails is admitting that's all his fault, no problem. Why can't he look sad instead of arrogant and angry a lot more often? Amy breaks the badnik with her hammer, being useful with it for the first time in the show. I'm just kidding. And Tails and Sticks attack Buzz Bombers too. Wait a minute, if this is supposed to be a guy who's trying to write things more like the games, it's a shame his influence didn't extend to having more badniks in the show that weren't just Buzz Bombers and Motobugs. These guys don't even look 100% like Buzz Bombers and Motobugs. And Eggman lampshades at Orbot Cubot take too long criticizing him. So, he's lampshading something that was the case in Unleashed in Colors. I think I would have preferred it if, instead of having them take too long criticizing him, they just criticized him once, and then he just complained that they criticized him too much. But even then, that's just a meta joke, because them criticizing Eggman too much is a thing in the games, not Sonic Boom. Sonic barely avoids falling to the cold water, and asks Knuckles to creatively throw him at Eggman's Eggmobile in Spin Dash form. And then Eggman leaves. Tails apologizes to Sonic, and Sonic forgets that Amy warned him things could get out of hand. They sweetly shake hands, and Tails is still sad, and Amy lampshades that all of them had communicators. And the story ends, but they shouldn't have forgotten that. And the story ends with Tails singing horribly when singing a romantic song on a stage in front of his friends. I forget, is he singing that for Zoe? It's forced that people don't all leave. Since he won the bet by capturing Sonic, I guess he's just that desperate to make it up to them by humiliating himself. But they're just suffering more! Sonic the creator's pet should be doing this. This whole plot is full of aggravating idiot balls, making the characters either idiots or jerks. Can you tell he wrote this? Well, this episode was by Ian Flynn. And I immediately noticed the difference, because the entire episode had the characters being noticeably out of character from what you'd expect, even when compared to how they are in the previous episodes. Tails immediately became an overconfident cliché genius, just to justify a plot where he tried to capture Sonic, which was at least a refreshing twist on the norm, although even that's not refreshing, since Sonic's friends trying to capture him has been done before, not only in the show, but also in Sonic X. So I should have figured with Flynn, even when he thinks he's being original, he's not. And I love seeing the different traps that were used, but still, Tails is supposed to be humble. It's in his character description. Previous episodes showed him as being naive, not an overconfident brat. Then we see him fall for Tails' trap, while ignoring that Tails was telling him to stop having the idiot ball. And then we had him ask whether Sonic was the mechanical genius or not, which he wouldn't ever ask. I'm torn because this is a refreshing episode. I liked seeing that the gang of friends eat lunch outside together, like they eat burgers like normal people, although again, they do that every episode. I loved seeing Sonic pat Tails' head and seeing Tails be insecure and sad and admit that he made a mistake. So it was a relatively good episode by Flynn's standards, but it was annoying seeing Flynn's trademark lack of regard for keeping the characters in character be the basis of an entire episode. Tails is humble, and Sonic's best friend. It's not like Sonic ran over his invention with a truck by accident. He would need a lot more motivation to scheme against Sonic and try to capture him than this. Why doesn't Eggman just give him one of his evil cookies again? Instead, he's just doing this in a fit of arrogance out of nowhere, even though we've seen how much Eggman loses and how fast Sonic is, so he should be smart enough to know better. Though it wouldn't be as interesting if he was just working for Eggman and brainwashed, because we've seen that before. Either way, it'd be someone trying to capture him for Eggman, which is hardly new. It was a creative plot, or at least it felt creative, but I noticed the writing quality dip. You'd think if Eggman could invent a device that would trap the heroes in blue force fields, like in My Fair Stixie, Tails would be more than smart enough to do the same thing. Realistically, as long as he caught Sonic off guard, he'd capture Sonic easily, but instead Sonic the Creator's pet always got away because of his super speed. Every single time. I mean, what is that?